All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tackle and Tacos. This is episode 86, actually, of the show. So thank you for tuning in. We got an awesome guest.
Yeah,
Uh,
man.
I'm ready for this one. We've actually been in communication for a little while, trying to get this one lined up, and yeah, like I said, I'm stoked for it. Miles Burghoff, the man,
Phew.
Sonar Fishing,
Yep.
Miles Sonar Burghoff. So I'm ready for it. Like I said, we've been working to set this one up for a little while. Him and I have been
Yeah.
going back and forth, and had some good talks. But he's on now, so we're gonna
It's
get him here
here.
in just a second. He
It's
is.
here.
Well, not.
The only time we've had this happen, Nate, where we finally got somebody on we were working with. I don't know if you remember, is when we had Trevor from the Outdoor Drive podcast on out in Connecticut, New Hampshire, wherever the
Yeah.
heck it is on the East Coast. And we had that super bad storm here, and like my internet went down. That was the only time where we finally had somebody lined up that it got like axed.
Yeah, that
Other
was
than that,
Yeah, that one got axed like mid-episode too. We had like
yeah, he was flowing
recorded like
too,
half,
man.
but yeah, that was a
Yeah, he
really,
was
really
telling
good one.
shark catching stories and all this craziness, and it was
Yeah,
like, you're
all
like,
that
God dang
striper
it.
fishing.
Yeah, that was wild, but that won't
Yeah,
happen today because it's just cold here. Cold's not going to shut down the internet, I don't think.
no,
But yeah,
should
like
be
you said,
good.
Miles Burghoff, that's a pretty big deal. There's not, I don't know anybody in, and it's a tight knit community, but I don't really know anybody in the bass fishing community who doesn't know who this cat is. From
Yeah,
hosting TV shows to being on basically every podcast you can imagine, to just being an incredibly articulate fella. The thing I really like about him, like on his YouTube, is when he talks, it just feels like he believes what he's saying. And I know that sounds like, well, duh, you should, but that's not
yeah,
always how it is. Like you'll watch a hunting vid and somebody be like, boy, this right here, this is the best grunt tube I ever buried. And you're like, come on, dude, like get off it.
yeah,
You're like a
exactly.
sham wow guy. Like you're just selling. But if I think if Miles said like, this is the best grunt tube, I'd be like, maybe I should get that one. Because he just
Yeah,
feels like an authentic dude. Like it doesn't feel forced or like fabricated. And so I'm excited to get some info from him. One thing we're going to touch on with him is sponsorship. So like what are sponsors in the fishing world? That's like a buzzword that you hear a lot, and I've never really heard somebody like break it down. Like, what does that mean? And you'll hear people all the time say like at podcasts and stuff, or at podcast on podcasts, or during like their YouTube videos, whatever. Couldn't do this without the sponsors. And I'm always like, dude, shut up. Yes, you could. Like, you know what I'm saying? But at some
yeah,
level, though, on some level, though, that's actually true. Like
no,
for
for
like a
sure.
touring pro, or from somebody who's doing like an actual TV show where they have to sell time in order the sponsor. Without the sponsors, they probably couldn't. And what does that mean? How do you get sponsors? What does it mean to be sponsored? How do you keep sponsors? That's not the only thing we're going to talk about, but this fella's a great asset, a great human to talk about that. So that'll be dope. We're going to talk tacos. We're going to talk family life, fishing, what's coming up in 25, all the goods. And speaking of sponsors, Nate, real quick, we're going to roll through ours, and then we will bring the man back on. Well, on for the first time. You and I were just talking to him, but nobody listening or watching knows that. But the presenting sponsor just had an awesome meeting with all the big wigs today at Grizzly. And I said I was just going to breeze through them, and I am. But I just want to give a special shout out to Grizzly. These are some of the realest folks out there. They were very specific, like, hey, we kind of want to get more into the fishing space. What kind of things can Grizzly make, or do we make, that would benefit you as a fisherman, like during a day of tournament fishing? Would it be better to have a coffee cup, like where it's skinny, that fits in a cup holder, and then it's bigger on top, but the lid can't open? So if you spill it in your boat, it doesn't spill all over. Would it be better to have, like we talked about, that kenai, or sort of like dry, really narrow lunchbox, so you can put your Sammys or food in there in the cooler that's not going to get wet? Just all kinds of stuff, bigger size dry bags, whatever. And I'm like, dude, we're nobody. Like we're not like, you're not talking to Kevin Van Darn here. And they wanted our input on it. And that's really cool for that company. So grizzlycoolers.com, use the code WCB, Working Class Bow Hunter, for 15% off your whole order. That's pretty dope. That's pretty huge. Giltech, makers of what I believe are some of the finest terminal tackle functions out there, from like the Marabou feather tube jig head that is just, if you fish smallmouth and you ever throw a tube, whether it's a regular tube or you rig it up stupid tube style, whatever, that little bit of marabou that sits out, if you're fishing it slow, it just kind of is it ungulate? I think it's undulate.
I think it's
Ungulate
undulate.
is like hooved animals like deer and elk, but it just barely moves in the water. It's a brilliant lure from fishermen, made by fishermen. Their net heads, their swim jigs are absolute top of the line. And like I said before, they're getting ready to launch a new Giltech site, which is pretty exciting, and some new jigs, and it's going to be dope. So Giltech, Gilltek, is how you find their stuff. Only right now at his supply company, Hook and Arrow Supply Co. Is an incredible company from deer feed, where you can make your own blend of different deer food plot stuff, to a local bait shop where you can go get you some minnows and stuff, to tackle, to whatever. Awesome deal. And then our last one is, of course, Loophole Optics. We're honored to be a part of their performance eyewear team, along with sticks like Seth Fighter and Stetson Blaylock and BP, and these dudes who are just hammers on hammers.
Absolutely.
It's pretty exciting to be a part of their team as well. And they've also been just so cool to work with, from their binoculars to the sunglasses. They're just easygoing people who make incredible stuff. And we're stoked to be a part of that. You can get us on Waypoint TV. We are part of the Working Class Bowhunter Podcast Network, which is such a mouthful every time. And then for any socials or the Yerturbs, for us, it's just Tackle and Tacos, A-N-D, not the and sign, but A-N-D Tacos. And yeah, I think that's it. What did I miss, Nate?
You hit it all. Hit it all on the head. Perfectly articulated. Job well done. As
Besides
usual.
the ungulate.
We worked through that. Yeah, we worked through that. So
I just wish I could go back and edit this, but I'm too lazy, so we'll just let it rip. We're just gonna keep it on there, you know. So
perfect.
All right, so let's bring in the dude. Like I said, this guy is somebody we've wanted on this podcast forever. Again, if you are into fishing, especially tournament or competitive bass fishing, you know who this guy is. Authentic human being, makes incredible videos. If you go to his website, which is sonarfishing.com, I think, is that right? I think that's right. If you go to his website, you can find all his social links, his YouTube stuff. And on his YouTube, I would say this is like one of those YouTubes where you can just sit back and just let it rip, because there's everything from like lure reviews, lure previews, like what's going to be hot in 25, how to be better at chatterbait fishing, real life stuff, tournament angling, shorts. It's across the board. It's just good. You really can't miss out. And so with no further ado, let's bring on the man, Miles Sonar Burghoff. What's up, man?
What's going on, guys?
Hey.
Two things. First off, honored to be here.
Heck yeah.
And second thing, I've never blushed so much during this. So thank you guys so much.
Well, it's much
been
deserved.
like a year of not being out there, and so that meant a lot to me.
Well, yeah, you're a stud, man.
Yeah.
Just without you being on a trail or whatever, like we all know who you are. Like you've been doing this thing for a long time and killing it for a long time. So no, it's the truth, man. Honestly, so like, yeah, I'm not a sycophant. I'm not a sucker upper. You're just an authentic dude that I'm stoked to have on the podcast. So thank you for doing this, man.
No, thank you. I'm already digging it. Like I really like your guys' style already, and I haven't even really talked at all. So I just dig it already. And I told you, Nate, before we got on here, I was going to bring some tacos, because with the name like that, you got to bring some tacos.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I didn't bring any. We made some last night.
Attaboy.
Venison tacos.
Yes.
And I was
nice.
meaning to save some for today, but I'm a big guy. I usually eat all of the food.
Go through them, dude.
I know how that goes. Yeah. So so we brought it up already. We might as well dive right in.
Might as well.
Mm-hmm.
What is your go-to taco topping? You had venison tacos last night. You have a taco. What's it got to have on it?
Well, we had a white person venison taco night, so it's pretty much just regular, white bread, corn taco shells,
right?
And from Walmart, and I put some tomatillo salsa on it, but usually, man, we did a really good venison street taco, so like a slow cooked street taco or slow cooked venison, and that was my favorite. So I toasted up like some legit corn tortillas, and then we put that slow cooked venison on there, and then just diced up some onions, and put a little bit of cheese on some of them, but then just that tomatillo and just a little bit of hot sauce. It was so killer.
Perfect. Heck yeah.
I'm pretty basic. I'm not
that doesn't sound basic at all. That doesn't sound
Yeah.
like that sounds awesome.
That one, well, yeah, that one was a little bit out of the norm. Usually we're
Okay.
just doing that kind of like just generic taco shell deal.
Yeah. But I mean,
Right.
people always talk about like white people tacos like it's a bad thing, just like flour
Dude,
tortilla,
that's what I
ground
grew up
beef.
on.
It's so freaking good. You can't go. I remember when I was little, man. Okay, so two things. Number one, my dad, he was born in '56, so he's not like super old, but he ain't young. He didn't have a taco till he was in college because he thought they looked weird. Which like, what the F is that? Anyway, I remember as a kid we would have like burrito nights every once in a while, and he would do like the straight up like is it Knorr's or whatever, like that seasoning, like the dry powder, like just as white and basic as you can get, and I loved it. I never complained. He would make the Campbell's nacho cheese out of the can, which just sounds terrible, but it's not. Like it works.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with white folk tacos. They're good.
Heck
Yeah,
no,
not at all.
It's not Mexican cuisine at that point. But I grew up in California, so like I've had some really good Mexican food.
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing, but it's its own little thing that has a lot of you've had it ever since you were a little kid. So
it works. We talk about this on the show all the time, but like they're not the same at all. But fishing and tacos in a certain way are sort of similar. Like fishing, as long as you're not breaking laws, like, you always hear that when Nate and I worked at Gander Mountain, I would spend forever, months on the water, beating up the water, trying to catch big muskies. And a guy would come in, like, I caught me a 52 on a crappie jig. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, that's not the rules. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. But like with tacos, like slap some venison in there, make a dessert taco, put chicken in there, put fish in it, do a vegetarian taco. My wife could eat like guacamole and salsa and like not even put meat in it, and she'd be happy as a clam. Like tacos are just dope. You can just do whatever you want,
Do it your style. Do
exactly
it your way,
right.
man.
Yeah, dude.
No wrong way.
Right. So, all right. So let's go off of something you just said, Miles, which is where you grew up, California. Walk us through a little bit, and you can go as deep or whatever as you want with it. But give us a bit of your background on how you got started into fishing. And I was listening to a podcast with you today, and you didn't really mention it. So I'm also curious, where did the light bulb come on for not just fishing, but tournament fishing?
So, starting off with like kind of the genesis of my love for fishing, I actually was born down in Florida, and I grew up for my first 5 years in the Keys, so down in Marathon, Florida.
That's crazy.
And so we were around water. My dad had a boat. We lived on a canal, so we were going fishing all the time. And so that's where I like water is, was immediately just ingrained in me. I was so drawn to it. My daughter's favorite movie is Moana, and it's like I'm the same way. It's
that's
like
a good
I'm
one.
drawn to the water. And then we also have a place in Connecticut, a small little cabin on a lake up there, and that's kind of where I fell in love with bass fishing in particular. Probably because it was more accessible for a kid, and there was a little bit of independence that I got from it. Because like saltwater fishing had to go with my dad. Probably I'm just kind of guessing as to my mindset at the time, but I had to go with my dad. But in Connecticut, I could just walk down to the pond by myself and kind of get it figured out and explore and kind of discover, which I think is really important for kids, around that age. And then moving to California, I always carried that love for fishing with me, but the problem was I just didn't have the access. California is an incredible state for outdoor recreation and fishing, hunting. I mean, hunting is a little iffy. I think they're pretty tight on regulations over there.
Sure.
Wow.
But it was kind of like Florida a little bit. There wasn't as much accessibility as far as the type of fishing that I wanted to do. I didn't have a boat or anything like that.
Sure.
But getting into high school, I started getting into a bass club and started going, fishing with other guys that had bass boats, and really started getting into the competition side. But it wasn't until I read a Bass West magazine. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a Bass West magazine.
Oh yeah,
I think so.
But
maybe you have. I don't know if I have.
Yeah,
I don't even know if they're around still. But I got into a Bass West magazine, and on the cover it was Mike O'Shea. I think it was there's a few guys. Gosh, There was Aaron Martins and a couple other guys on the cover. It was, John Murray was another one.
Okay. Yep.
Anyways, they're all in their tournament jerseys, and that just, even at a young age, I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are like professionals.
Yeah.
You could just tell with all the logos and everything. It's like these guys are doing something. And so I ended up, reading some bass fishing magazines. And of course, at that time, we're going to get into this topic pretty soon, I would assume. At that time, I was, tournament anglers were one of the sole influencers in the market. We never coined that term until social media, right? But tournament anglers were the influencers. There were some, TV personalities, radio and stuff like that. But anyways, so like I was reading about all these guys that I idolize to this day, that were making a living fishing, and that kind of like opened the door. And then I ended up, not to get too deep on this whole life story, but senior year of high school, you're supposed to do a senior year project where, I don't know if it's every high school, but ours, we're supposed to do some type of organize some type of event, and also do interview somebody that's in the business that you want to be in.
Okay.
And so the event that I organized was a fishing tournament for teens. And so we put together 50, we got 50 boats to take out 50 teen anglers.
That's great.
And this 14, I think she was a 14-year-old girl, ended up winning it. It was like awesome. A $500, savings bond or something like that. That was really cool. But the person that I interviewed was Ray Scott.
Oh gosh.
And I actually finagled my way just out of bold.
How did you line that up? Wow.
Just being dumb and bold and young. I don't know how I did it, I got the cojones to do it. But Ray Scott called me up one day because I wrote him a letter, and he's just like, well, do you want to do this interview over the phone? And I was like, honestly, Mr. Scott, I would really like to do it in person. And so this is one of the only times that I've ever actually leveraged my dad's a celebrity. In the sport. Of course, the name Sonar is a play off of my dad's character Radar on MASH. But it's like I don't even think of it that much. So I haven't really leveraged it that much other than the name. But in that moment, I was a nobody that Ray Scott was talking to on the phone. I was talking to my idol, the one person that I appreciate so much for creating the business that we now have an opportunity to make a living in. And I had to take that opportunity. And I said, well, Mr. Scott, do you watch MASH at all? And he said, well, my wife, Susan, she loves MASH. And so I was like, well, I told him who my dad was. And I was like, I would really like to bring my dad and myself to your place to interview you. And we ended up, I flew down.
That's awesome.
And we went to Ray Scott's Pint Lala, probably not saying it right, property down there. He was so generous. Everybody at, Whitetail Institute. Did you know that Ray Scott started that?
I think I knew he had something to do with it. I don't know if I knew he started it, but
I don't know if he legitimately started it from the ground up, but he was at least a main part of it.
Yeah, sure.
But anyways, all those people there were just fantastic. His wife Susan was just awesome, and I got to meet Ken Duke, who has had many roles now in bass fishing. But he, at the time, he was senior editor of Bassmaster Publications,
right?
And so from there, it was very serendipitous. So it was that one, not a lot of people have that opportunity to leverage a parent's, celebrity in that way, which, nowadays I'm kind of embarrassed by, but I'm so glad that I got to connect with Ray at that time. And boy,
that's awesome.
And it just gave me a lot of confidence to just be like, okay, these are as much as I, treasure these people as idols, they're regular people. I can do it. I can do this. And so
how old were you at this point?
16 or no, I was 18.
Holy crap! Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's what. And how can I ask now that you brought it up? How was the interview? Like, what did that look like? How long did it go? Did you ask him some like heavy hitting questions, or was it like, "What's your favorite color"?
The interview was I don't even remember the interview portion of it at all. I just
Yeah,
remember going fishing on Ray Scott's Lake and
yeah.
going to dinner with them, and really,
Dang.
really it was so much interaction with my dad. And so I just kind of, I did a legit interview, but that was not the memorable part, because that was
Sure.
just like part of the task. It was really just trying to learn, about, the sport from him. And
Yeah.
so he was so generous. It
Wow.
was amazing. I've
That's
got a
insane.
picture of it
I was
somewhere.
That
gonna
is
ask if you got a
that's
photo of that, because that's something
Yeah,
special, dude.
it's
it's
I'm
an
gonna
awesome story.
I know it's awkward online, but on air, but I think I can find it in
Yeah,
15
find it.
seconds.
Yeah, you're all
So,
right.
Yeah,
That's
pull
awesome.
it up.
Yeah, there's a
mhm.
few people in my life that I've met like that. One of them, Nate, was Pete Mena, the legendary muskie fisherman that
Yeah,
like I wanted so badly to meet him. And then when I did, I was sort of nervous, and he was so cool and so nice and talked to me about fishing, asked me about what I was using, was I catching them? Like there's something kind of cool about that when people actually give a rip who are, important or famous or whatever. Because sometimes people say that thing like don't meet your heroes, but I've found mostly in the fishing world, most of my heroes have been cool as crap. They haven't been like that, that douchebag style, like arrogant type cat.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. That, that's one of the things I love about this sport and this industry, is just how down to earth everybody is. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not inflated,
Yeah,
which is a beautiful thing. It's just everybody's so approachable. I can't
yeah,
find it right now,
it's all
and I
good.
don't want to waste your guys' time, but it is a really cool picture that I treasure. I'm looking for it right now to see if I've got it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was funny, because when I woke up that first morning, because we get down there in the dark and meet Ray, and we go down, and he's got a guest house with a couple bed guest house.
Mm.
And I walk in there, and I pick one of the two beds that has a plaque above it that says, "This is George W. Bush's bed." And then
What?
on a post-it note, it said, "Bill Dance also slept here."
Oh my
so
gosh.
Bill, so Bill put that little note
Just
on
laying
there,
there
and
absorbing.
yeah, and Ray was like, he's just like, you see that boathouse right there? You go. More of a Bill Taylor impression right now, but um, he's like, there's a Triton boat in there, and you get in that boat, and you just go fish in the morning, without me. And I'm like, okay.
All right.
And so I took that thing out, and just trolled around and caught 4-pounder after 4-pounder.
Gosh.
And I look up towards his house, and he's sitting there with a tripod, just taking pictures of me.
Whoa,
He was the
crazy.
coolest. He was the coolest dude.
Wow. And that's
that's
where he's
awesome.
Alabama, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Near
Jeepers criminy.
Montgomery.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's wild. Okay. So you're there, you're 18.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go from there after you kind of getting your feet wet? You meet the the Lord and Savior of our sport, essentially.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from there?
So I ended up graduating high school and like sticking around Paradise, California,
Okay.
which is where I grew up, for a year. And at that time, I was kind of saving up some money, so I worked in Alaska. I still work in Alaska at a lodge called the Baranof Wilderness Lodge. Another formative place for me. I've been very lucky to meet some incredible people and experience some
Awesome.
things. And so I
Heck yeah.
worked my first 2 seasons up there, made what I thought was a ridiculous amount of cash. And
Yeah.
then I packed up my truck and moved to Florida, and started going to school over there, including University of Central Florida. And so I went all in bass fishing. I moved into a travel trailer, and I was definitely single the majority of that time.
Definitely.
And, yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, relationships are hard when you live in a 19 and a half foot travel trailer.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe 20 something. But anyways, so I just focused on fishing, fished a ton of BFLs and like weekend series events, and then got into college fishing, and just continued from there. And just I always took care to kind of move around based on like what I was really bad at. So like if I didn't know how to fish, a highland reservoir, I would move close to a highland reservoir so I could figure out how to fish that style of fishery.
Okay.
So I fished like 8 different divisions of the BFLs and over the years, and a bunch. So yeah, just a fishing bum.
Yeah.
That's definitely the epitome of going all in when you're moving and traveling around to kind of hone your craft. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's certain career paths, and if it's a really highly desired career path like fishing is, and there's a lot of it's accessible, you have to be all in. If you have a backup plan, I mean, you're already got one foot out the door.
Sure.
And so the thing that I've learned over the years is that if you go all in on a career like this, and I have to actually talk to parents about this principle more than I have to talk about to their like high school or college, kids that are looking to make this a career. I have to like sit them down and just be like, listen, they got to go all in. Like, don't force a plan B upon them. Yeah. You can teach them good principles, especially in finances and things like that. I wish somebody taught me about that. But don't assert a plan B, because what will happen is if you go all in on something like tournament bass fishing or the, just fishing industry in general, you're going to learn skills just out of just raw, necessity, that you can apply anywhere. Like you'll learn how to sell things. You'll learn how to work with people. You'll learn how to be, mentally strong under adversity. You'll learn how to deal with, not having any money in the bank. There's all kinds of stuff that you can learn, and skill sets that you can carry on to so many different things. And nowadays, I could go create a production company and create my own content and create other people's content. There's so many things that I've learned over the years in this space that I don't need a plan B. In fact, I'm more ready to jump into whatever, just by doing this, and just focusing on my dreams.
Well, daggum. That's great advice. I mean, who was that? Was it Cortez who burned the boats in history?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know if you know that story. So basically, there's these guys who were, traveled across the seas in their boats to take on this area to conquer that land, and all his people were scared, and they're like, we're going to go back. So in the middle of the night, he burned the boats, so they had no choice, and they ended up winning and fighting. They fought and won because there was no backup plan. There was no going back. And so it kind of sounds like that's where your brain is.
100%. I mean, I think that's where everybody's brain is. Over time, your priorities may change, and you may not want to be in this space anymore. But again, even if that's the case, I still believe that this is the school of hard knocks. Fishing, trying to make it as a professional angler is hard. It's low reward relative to other difficult career paths that you can get into. Yeah. It is high reward as far as like we talked about the people and being able to make a living in a sport that you're passionate about. But you can figure it out, so it's like I implore anybody that's looking to go after their dreams in this space, learn everything you can. It's not all about fishing. In fact, as far as making a living as a career, it's very little about fishing. There's so many other things. And so focus on learning everything. And boy, oh boy, by the end of your lessons that you'll learn over the years, chasing this dream, if you want to change paths, you're going to have the tools to do it.
Dang. Yeah, that's really good advice. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of learning things other than fishing, I really want to talk about sponsorship stuff in general. Take us to the Sonar School of Sponsors. But before we do, I want to ask you a stupid question that I thought of today.
Love it.
If I'm sure you've seen the movies like Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty.
Oh yeah.
So if there was Miles Almighty, but the only caveat was you can only change one thing as it directly relates to bass fishing, what would that one thing be?
Get rid of social media. If I was talking from a tournament angler's perspective, it would have to be like turn the clock on social media.
Wow.
Because it does bring a lot of great things. And this is from a selfish standpoint, because I feel like the industry as a whole is much better off with having such a broader reach, with all these different platforms. But from a tournament angler perspective, it was much better in the early 2000s and the 90s and stuff like that. Time periods like that, because again, those guys were the influencers at that point. They were the guys. So that pie, which hasn't grown very much as far as like the budgets that these companies have, these sponsors that we're going to talk about, that pie was relatively the same size, and it wasn't cut into all these tiny little slivers. It was essentially like the tournament guys, the tournament anglers. Even if you were kind of a moderately successful or mildly successful angler, if you had promotional inclinations, you were good on camera, or you wrote something, or you just taught people, it was a lot easier, I think, back then to pursue this as a career.
Sure.
And you had less distractions, because back then you weren't the content creator. You essentially were just the influencer, and the content creators, the guys that were writing and shooting, film and taking pictures, they were the ones coming to you. So it was like, all you had to do is sit there and talk, or, just be on camera and be visible. So it was a much easier time. So that's why I say it's selfish, because I don't think that the sport in the industry as a whole would be better. I think that it would be better for the tournament space.
Yeah, I think you're right.
As a whole. So that's just, I don't know. I don't know if that should have been the one thing that I changed, but in the tournament reality, for sure. I mean, I think that competitive fishing and strictly making a career out of tournament fishing is drastically different and much, much harder to do these days because of social media.
Yeah, I think you're right. I talked to somebody who I'm probably not at liberty to say who it was, but somebody who's kind of high up in a certain lure company, and they said they said something similar. They're like, I hate social media. Like back in the day, you could talk to Al Linder, and if he was like, I think your pro staff would be great, they'd be like, yeah, come on. Now somebody could talk to Al freaking Linder, and they'd be like, yeah, but how many engagements did you get off your last reel? Or and it almost seems like almost insulting, for the way things have been to the way they are. And so, I totally get what you're saying.
And here's the thing: it's it would be a selfish move to turn the clock back, because social media has done a lot of good things for the sport. The issue is, now I not only have to be a tournament angler and figure out those angles, but I also have to be a content creator and a promoter on overdrive. I try to do a video a day on YouTube, and I can't tell you how much that takes away from the focus of figuring out. So like, especially nowadays with having a kid, especially one that, everything we went through this year, I want to be home more. And so I'm going to have about 2 days a week to get on the water. And both of those days, pretty much the majority of them, I'm going to have to like film some content, which I love doing that. In fact, more and more, I love the content side, but it is a huge, draw of your energy and your focus from tournament fishing, especially at a time period where I need to be learning forward facing sonar. But not everybody just wants to watch forward facing sonar videos. So, it's a big catch, but that's a great question, by the way. I enjoy exploring that.
It's a weird one, for sure. But so just to press pause on that for 2 seconds, man. Like in a previous life, that was what I did. I was a social media, like a marketing manager for a couple different companies, and some of them were pretty large. And social media, a lot of people think, oh, that's so easy. Just post post a story here and there, post a post here and there. There's so much more to it between algorithms, peak times, off times, mixing up the different styles of social to post on. And it's a freaking steamroller. It never stops. You can't just post like one good video and then sit back on your laurels and be like, all right, I got a video. Okay, well, where's the next one at in a day or 2 days?
Right.
It's an ongoing, constant sort of like nagging at the back of your head. Like, okay, this post really landed, but I can't just redo that post because then that's sort of unoriginal. I got to do something different. But what if that post doesn't land and have as much engagement as this one? And I also have to worry about these reels, and now you can monetize shorts on YouTube. Like, there's so many factors in it. It's not as easy as some people think.
Yeah, and you are completely right. But it's also, I think it's harder than people think, because I talk to people a lot about, like, because everybody's just like, I want to, really put more energy into YouTube. I'm like, the hardest thing that's going to happen for you is for you to get over yourself, and for you to get over, not meeting your own personal benchmark of what, thought of what your content should be. Because content isn't about, that's why I mentioned that I love what you guys are doing. Just even being on for just a few seconds and talking with you guys for a few seconds is because you guys seem very authentic. You're open. You're not I feel like the old template of being, too pushy in your efforts to promote a company, or you're not filling a mold. You're just kind of having fun with it and doing it. And I think that being natural and authentic with the content is a learned skill. It's not something that's easy, because when you start doing it, you're trying to emulate somebody else, and you're constantly missing the mark. And so it takes a lot of energy just on that side, to like get over your self-consciousness, creating this content. And then you got to figure out where your niche is and like what you're good at. Like, I'm not the guy that's going to create a bunch of short videos that are cool or funny or something like that. I feel like I'm a funny dude, but I'm not going to be doing like a comedy reel like some guys would. I like the long form teaching content. I mean, I find that I'm really good at that. And it's just like fishing. Everything in life, you can apply the principles you learn in fishing to everything.
Absolutely.
And if you just focus on what you're good at and what you enjoy, it's going to resonate with an audience.
Totally.
And you can perfect all the little things along the way, figuring out like, how to cater to the algorithm, how to, walk the line between being too clickbaity, but also having a title that is at least, going to attract people. So your point is going to actually be seen. And there's so much to it, but if you enjoy it and you kind of fit it into your own mold, like, don't try to go do something that's outside of your comfort zone, because that's a recipe for disaster, as far as your personality.
Yeah. People can smell that fakeness. For sure. Okay, so let's go to the sponsorship thing real quick though, Nate. I'm going to interview you, Nate. What would you do if you could change one thing in bass fishing? Okay, mine really quick, if you need a second to think. Mine would be, I would get rid of.
I want you to talk, but first I'm going to talk.
But let me say something about me, for me. Did you ever see that one movie poster that was like Matt Damon starring in a Matt Damon about Matt Damon? That's what we're doing now, but it's Jordan time, except for nobody cares about me. I would get rid of MLF, BASS, and the NPFL, and not like abolish them, but I would have one league. I think that's where bass is really missing in general, bass fishing. There's not 5 NBAs, there's not 3 NFLs, there's not 4 Major League Soccers, there's not 3 NHLs. That's what I would do. And I don't know how I'd make that work. I don't know all the moving parts, but if I could, that's what I would do. Nate, what do you got?
I'm gonna say I would have to get some sort of major tournament trail, like you're saying you want to abolish. I want to add one, and I want it to be
going the opposite.
I want it to be a very big one, and I want it to be out on the West Coast. I just think like, not seeing, living here in Iowa, here in the Midwest, like, I don't know anything about the fishing out there, and I just want to see more of
BAM.
that. Exactly. Yeah. Just like BAM, I want to see more of that. I want to see, some of the big angler names. I want to see some of the big lakes that they go to, the giant fisheries.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know a single thing about fishing a like trout stocked, lake that, that's the primary
That
forage.
you can
Like, I don't
see to
have a
the
clue.
bottom in 30 feet of water.
Exactly.
And yeah,
And that sort of stuff just like crazy, like intrigues me. So
it
I
is
would
dope.
love to I'd love to see like a major trail, maybe BAM, something like that can really blow up and,
That would be dope.
get a lot of eyes on it.
Yeah,
Maybe
the only thing
draw.
about that though is like no good anglers have come from the West Coast.
Not a singular one. Yeah.
So that's that's where you're missing it though. Dude, I watched the Bass Cave video the other day on YouTube with Ish Monroe, and he's okay on the West Coast. He's all right at it.
Right. Yeah.
He's pretty good.
He's caught a couple.
Yeah. So all right, so let's do this, Miles. It's a word, right? Like it's a word you hear a lot. And it was actually, again, while I was listening to your podcast today, shout out Tom Rowland. Such a cool dude, great podcast, super articulate fella. He was supposed to be on our podcast. What's that?
Fit.
Is he really?
Fit.
I don't know if I knew that about him.
He's a maniac.
Is he really? Is he like Cam Hanes status?
Rob, yeah. Tom Rowland has given more people rhabdomyosis from overworking them at workouts. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, perfect.
But he, dude, he is. I remember when we were filming Sweetwater because he was the one of the producers.
Right. Yep.
Sweetwater.
Sweetwater was dope too.
Yeah, thank you. And he would just be shoveling in chia seeds. I'm sitting there eating tornadoes from Quick Trip and stuff, and he's just sitting there, chewing on chia seeds, and he's ridiculous. I try to emulate him, every once in a while, but I can't do it.
I can't either. I try to. I tell my wife like on a weekly basis, like I gotta get back into running, and she's like, "Honey, you haven't ran for like 5 years." And I'm like, I gotta get back into it though. It always feels like it was like a week ago, but like it's been so long. My running shoes have dust on them. They probably don't even fit. They're from like 8th grade or something. I don't know, but but you're talking to Tom, and the word sponsorship came up a little bit, and I kind of want to take it back to like the most fundamental level. If you would just take a couple minutes and walk us through, because in fishing, and I'm talking about it starts in high school. Like you said a little bit ago, with social media, it starts with social media influencers. And what is a sponsorship? Why is it important to fishing? How do you get sponsors? What do you do for sponsors? Is that statement, we couldn't do this without our sponsors, is that true? Whatever you want to say, let's hear it.
Well, yes, it is very true. It's overused, and it's kind of like an eye roller when you hear somebody say that, but it is 100% true because that's the business that we're in. So essentially sponsors, it's different in different sports, right? Because a sponsor of a sport that has more viewers, there's less that you have to do to accomplish the return on investment that a company is looking for, than you do.
That was really well put, by the way.
In the fishing space. But yeah, so sponsorship is essentially just working with an organization, a company, to accomplish some type of return on their investment, of some sort. So it's like they're essentially trading either their goods, services, or some cash component or something else in return for some type of exposure. And the deal is, it's not like it's charity and sponsorship are very different. And a lot of people think that they're kind of the same thing, and that's like the biggest mistake that you can make going into this business. Back in the day in bass fishing, and for the guys that are at the very, very top of the sport right now, the deliverables, the things that you have to do for to really maintain a sponsorship are a little bit different. For like the Jacob Wheelers of the world, the Kevin Van Dams, the guys that really just get a ton of eyeballs on them, regardless of if they do any social media or not. Gerald Swindle, it comes to mind too. Ike and Ellie, those guys, even though they're working their tail off, they're creating the content, they're doing, if they didn't want to do any of that, just the simple fact that they've got so much notoriety in the space, they could just through logo presence, get a sponsor to pay them, and it would probably be a decent deal. And so you would see that with, like a bicyclist. He doesn't have to be going like somebody that's this is a space that I know nothing about. I've watched some documentaries,
Yeah.
but say you're doing like the, I don't even know what the race is. What is it? It's the
Tour de France? Yeah.
Tour de France. Yeah. If you're doing the Tour de France, somebody puts a logo on your back, you know, you're probably getting paid pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, just for that, just for the logo presence. Okay. So that's what like most people think of when they're getting into the sport of bass fishing. They think of sponsorship as like, okay, I'm going to put my logo on my boat and their logo on my truck and on my jersey and all this stuff. And that's sponsorship. In bass fishing, for the vast majority of people, the return on the investment that those sponsors require, and the whole reason they're doing it, really has to come from a lot of different activities.
Okay.
Because there's just not enough eyeballs on, and it's also so saturated. Like everybody's got a wrap boat with so many logos. Like who's really paying attention to those logos? You know,
good point.
specifically, you know, unless you're having a really good run. So like nowadays, I'll just use myself as an example. I have to make sure that I'm building an audience and getting those eyeballs in some way. And for me, the avenue while I'm fishing the opens and not fishing the tour level at the moment is to do social media. And I've really, you know, loved building like the YouTube channel specifically. And that's how I get eyeballs on, you know, and ears to see and listen to what I have to say about the companies that I work with. And so that's what a sponsor is. It's essentially just a partnership that there are, you know, goods and services or money, you know, that is traded for your services.
Yeah.
And I know that was pretty drawn out explanation.
No, that was great. That was really good.
But it kind of, but I think it requires, I think it deserves a drawn out explanation, because it's one of the most misunderstood things in the sport. And like young anglers coming up, there's so many of them, they come into it thinking that fishing is the thing that they have to do. No, the thing that you have to do, I've always had this mantra that has served me well in this sport, and I learned it really from listening to people like Mike Iaconelli, who is probably one of the best in the business at capturing, you know, the whole idea of what your job is.
Sure. Yep.
And my job description to myself is to get people excited about fishing and teach them how to do it better. And if you can do that, if you can do both of those things, you're going to build an audience, and you're going to be able to serve, you know, companies in a way where, you know, you're not telling lies about products or anything like that. You're just directing people, consumers, in the way that is going to best serve them in their fishing endeavors.
Sure.
You know, and being in an outdoor space. So, you know, if you focus on that in this sport, and you get creative with it, and you just learn how to leverage, you know, that concept, I think that the sky's the limit, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. That's really good. What advice would you give to, let's say, a high school angler, an up and coming YouTuber? And by the way, I checked it. You've been doing your YouTube since 2010. That's freaking dope, dude. Like 15 years. Like,
boy,
that's incredible.
Boy, do I wish I did more videos back then.
No doubt, dude.
I was doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So I've got
back
a neighbor.
then it was easier.
Yeah, I've got a neighbor that's on YouTube, and I'm looking at he's got a big channel, and his garage is about 10 times my size of my garage. And so I'm like, golly, I wish I had been on YouTube longer. But anyways, you know,
wait, who's your neighbor?
I'm not gonna say.
Oh, okay.
I'm not gonna say.
I'm just so curious now. Now I'm like, it's probably better. I probably shouldn't have asked. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but no, I probably shouldn't have even said anything. But that's all right. But I'm just saying, like, the power of YouTube. Like,
it's wild.
If I had done my videos instead of my silly little Alaska videos, if I had done that back then, I mean, golly, those guys that really captured everything, like Tactical Bassin and Fluke Master and all those folks, if I had done that and tournament fished, there would be no worries.
It's crazy. But, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wild. But that's the thing, is that social media, as much as I wanted to change it in that question, that hypothetical that you threw out there, social media has really served consumers well.
Sure.
Because, and that's very important for the sport as a whole. So, guys that are teaching principles of fishing, that's only good for the sport. And that opened up, there's guys that are not inclined to spend $60,000 a year on fishing expenses for tournament fishing, but they are good at what they do, and they can communicate, to other people how to be better.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the beautiful thing,
Yeah, it can
makes
be
it
cool.
harder for us,
yeah.
but
Yeah. So how would you, what I was going to ask you is what advice would you give somebody? Like, how do you approach if you're looking to go to the next level and you're not just, because it's really easy to do this, I think, to assimilate fishing equals sponsored fishermen, go call Z-Man and be like, hey, I want a tournament. Can you sponsor me? Like, not that, but somebody who's wanting to do it the right way. What advice would you give to somebody on how to retain and work with sponsors?
First off, be patient.
That's good.
And part of patience is understanding where you're at. I guess the first thing is understand what your job is. Your job in this space is, when it relates to sponsors, obviously winning tournaments is one thing. That is very hard to it's impossible to plan on, right?
Yeah, sure.
But making a steady living is about working with companies, at least the old model. Now there's some things that you can do nowadays that you couldn't do back in the day,
sure,
or that were harder, but you've got to work with these companies. And so you got to be patient, because if you're a young angler, even if you've done well in some tournaments, who really knows who you are? You haven't built that audience yet. And even though you have personal value, you should have self-confidence, and you have a lot of value as a person. You don't have marketing value yet. And you have to build that. You have to build your audience. And so that's the first thing I would suggest is just start dabbling in or not dabble, but jump head first into the deep end of social media and creating content. Figure out which platforms you enjoy doing the most and what you're good at. Is it short form? Is it long form? Is it, something else? And start building that audience. And once you get eyeballs on you and you start turning some heads, then you have a platform to start entering into relationships and following relationships. And by the way, while you're building your foundation of an audience, you should be going out there and networking, but you shouldn't be going to ICAST and the Classic asking for anything and looking for sponsorship in my book. You should be going there, having your face visible to these companies, getting to know people, just building friendships with people. And guess what? When they will start noticing, people will start noticing when you are starting to build momentum and starting to build an audience. And when that happens, you already have the relationships. And when they're sitting in a meeting, when Z-Man's sitting in a meeting, and talking about who they should bring on board to represent, Georgia or North Carolina or a different market or the entire country, or just for YouTube or something like that, be like, oh man, Miles, we see him around all the time. You see him at every class, guidecast. He has never asked for anything, but he's killing it, and we love that guy. Here's the thing: is everybody likes to poo-poo it's not it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that in my book.
Yeah, totally.
Because everybody wants to. Resumes don't mean anything. It's a piece of paper. You can mold it in some very good ways to make you sound good, but it's really the best resume that you have is you. And if you're out there, building those relationships, that's when it comes. Because very few sponsorships that I have, even nowadays, come from me just soliciting them, through email or something like that. So it's you got to build that relationship base, while you're building your value. and then they just come together on their own. Like, it's very frustrating, but you just got to do it. And then another thing, which is important all throughout your career, is just don't burn any bridges. You burn a bridge in this sport, in this industry. I know 5 or 6 guys that have been at 5 or 6 different companies, as marketing managers or some other high up position.
Oh, so yeah, you burn one, so go there, and he's like, no way.
I know one guy that went from Trocard to Plano to 2 other brands that and it's like if you burn a bridge at one company, everybody wants to stay in the fishing industry because everybody loves each other. Everybody loves this sport, and going to ICAST, it's like Thanksgiving dinner. You're just going there and meeting up with your friends.
That's awesome.
And so like, they want to stay in the industry, so you don't want to burn any bridges because it could affect you in ways that you would never imagine.
That's great advice, man. That's really good advice. I was actually going to ask you about that, like the solicitation model, like going to knock on doors or just let it happen organically. So you probably know behind the scenes a good bit. Let's just say Z-Man, since you have an entire store and a half behind you over there.
A wall, yeah.
I mean, seriously. At Z-Man, I would assume I know the answer to this, but are they just bombarded with people being like, sponsor me, sponsor me?
Everybody is. And I haven't made this public at all, so you guys got the exclusive on this. So it doesn't relate to Z-Man, but I'm actually the pro staff manager now for Pro Guide Batteries.
Oh, right on. Awesome.
Wow. So like, I'm seeing it from that perspective. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm seeing it from that perspective. You get solicited all the time, and as a company like Z-Man, especially because they're so visible in the space and everybody's, using their products.
Right.
Everybody wants to be sponsored by Z-Man, and I commend Z-Man for really taking the tact of like really reinvesting in their pro staff that it already exists before really expanding their pro staff. Mm-hmm. But they probably get, I don't know, dozens a day. I mean, that would not surprise me if they're getting dozens a day of sponsorship requests and product requests from influencers. It's you get it a lot, but that's the thing. That's the reason why that model doesn't work. That whole cold calling doesn't work. It's like, you got to go you got to shake their hand, and it's not. And if done the wrong way, you're just shaking hands and meeting people for an ultimate payoff. I'm telling you, and that's how I did it in the beginning, is like, I'm going there because I want to be a professional angler. So of course I'm like going into ICAST back in 2009 or something like that, and just like trying to get sponsors. But I learned over time, I'm like, well, I don't really have anything to give. So I'm just going to enjoy my time here. And I seem to be building a lot of relationships and then in friendships. And then over time, I just started getting phone calls. That's awesome. And the problem is, you can get discounts everywhere, from so many companies.
Sure.
Right. But if you're very serious about the sport, I would pay full price for everything that you possibly can.
Yep.
And the reason for that is that if you get in with a company at a discount, the chances that you can scale that partnership to a legitimate paying deal, even when you do have value, is very little. Okay. It's much better for you to let them come to you. And I'm not saying like sitting at home and waiting for the call. I'm just saying, like, just don't try so hard.
Yep.
I guess.
Yep.
It's almost like dating.
Sense.
Just don't try so hard. As soon as you stop trying, it seems easy.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I remember back in the day, I was kind of in the music scene in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and around here in Wisconsin, like underground hip hop music, whatever. And one of my friends who's in this pretty big hip hop group called Atmosphere, like they're pretty huge now, but they're also kind of underground or whatever. I remember he used to always say, like, do it by yourself so that you don't need a record label, and when you don't need them, that's when they're all going to want you. Like this idea of like, build up your own thing so that you're firing on all cylinders. So when they come asking for you, it's more like, well, no, what can this record label do for me? Because I already know I'm killing it. you know, like
Right.
where you're not going to them at the very entrance of your career, like, hey, you know, sponsor me, give me some free Ned rigs. Like, yeah, wait till your brand is up and firing, let it happen organically. Okay, last question I want to ask you. You've been killing this, unless you got one, Nate. A misconception. Okay, I know a little bit about this just from some folk that I know, but what percentage do you think, if you can quantify it in percentages, what percentage of pro anglers or sponsored anglers get free boats?
Oh, it's in the single digits.
It's teeny, yeah,
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I do not get a free boat. As opposed, I love and offended at the same time by the comments that I get all the time.
Yeah.
Where, you know, if I'm talking about my Phoenix boat, somebody's like, "Oh, you should
Must be
like
nice
it. You
getting
get
a
it for
free
free
one."
and get a free truck and a camper." I'm like, dude, I'm making payments on all of this stuff. You know, it's not very few. And I love my partnership with you know, Phoenix and you know, they're very, very generous. But in general, the market has changed. The industry has changed to where it's just so oversaturated, and they've learned that, you know, they don't need to give out, you know, bass boats anymore. It used to be, I would say that it could, back in the day, you're almost looking at like the legitimate top tier professionals, tour level professionals, on like the FLW tour and Bassmaster tour. Probably I would guess that you maybe even at like 30-40% were getting free boats.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true, but
And now you think it's less than 10?
Oh, way less than 10.
Yeah,
I would say like 4%.
Yeah. Wow.
At most. Yeah. So, and that's another piece of advice I want to give young people, because this year, you know, so like we just went through this whole life-changing experience with my daughter getting diagnosed with cancer and moving to Memphis to live at St. Jude while she got treated. And when that sort of thing happens, you really reevaluate, because at that point we were broke when that happened. Like, I was down at Okeechobee, like worried if I was going to get a check so I could actually drive back home without having to put it all on a credit card.
Wow.
You know, and so we had just spent all of our savings on building this house over here. And so things change after an event like that. And I realized this year and I had good habits with credit cards. I haven't paid interest in like 5 or 6 years since I was able to pay them off.
Wow.
And so I thought I was like really good at the financial side and being thoughtful, but I also had a truck camper, a Lance truck camper, a Ram 3500
it does that weird thing. Why does it do that when you do a thumbs up? It does that. I don't know. Sorry, it's really weird. Sorry.
I just had
a business
I just had a business meeting with a few guys, and for some reason my background had just randomly would have birthday balloons pop up. But anyway,
the crap.
Yeah, but so I had the truck camper, the Ram 3500 to haul it. We had a fifth wheel that we lived in while we're living over here. Had a boat and a bunch of stuff on making payments on it. And
wow.
I had got some bad advice over the years from accountants that are, you know, I asked them, hey, should I buy this for a write-off? And I couldn't afford to pay cash. And they're like, of course. Yeah. If you can, you should buy it and bring your income down on paper. And so I was always getting loans and stuff, man. I would suggest to anybody, like right now we sold that fifth wheel. We sold the truck camper. I'm selling the Ram 3500, trying to get rid of this, my 2023 Phoenix, for anybody out there.
Right.
And so like, I think that's a trap that we're all getting into. And my goodness, I just went to a college tournament like 2 or 3 months ago. Everybody had a brand new boat with electronics on it. All those
they're
guys
paying for the rest of their lives.
Let me tell you something. You guys out there, if you don't learn anything from me in this video, read about the time value of money. Okay, learn about TVM, because that is going to change your life. I was just talking to Bobby Bakewell, a buddy of mine that used to fish as a co-angler. Now he's killing it. He's going to the Classic this year.
Wow.
Great up and coming angler. Check him out. Anybody that's looking at, keeping their eye on the young anglers. He just missed the Elite Series qualification here. And I told him, I was just like, man, I'm going to get into some real deep, old blue hair type, advice here. But like, I feel like an old person. I'm like, dude, start putting $100 away a month, or $200, and then scale it based on what your income is. If you do $100 a month for 45 years, you're going to have almost $900,000 in the bank, just from a $46,000 investment or something like that. And so I was just trying to hammer it home for him, because I know where he's at. I wish somebody had told me that, because this career path is up and down. You need to like protect yourself from a financial standpoint in retirement. And so I don't want anybody else to be here at 38, something happened with their family and realize, oh my gosh, I got all this debt and I don't have hardly any savings, so that's tough. I don't mean to go on.
That's great advice.
That's awesome.
It's advice that nobody is giving.
Yeah.
And it's so important. I'm not saying that you're not going to make a killing in this industry. You can absolutely make a killing in this industry if you get creative and do things that are valuable to companies, or create your own company or something like that. But you also need to just make sure that you understand, the principles of money, and put some away for your future. So, and I the reason why I'm saying this on this podcast is because I want more people to be able to survive the grind.
Yeah. That's
and
good.
I'm seeing so many young anglers that are throwing so much money at boat loans and truck loans, because that's what looks cool. That's what they're supposed to be doing, apparently. And they're not going to survive 10 years. They're not going to make it a decade in this industry. And that's overall, I think, a bad thing for us.
Yeah, man, that was awesome.
Yeah. Well put. That was really cool.
Yeah, Professor Miles and the school of sponsorships. I mean, honestly,
I didn't realize he was going to go there, but
I loved it.
Just got a wild hair. I've been nonstop thinking about this.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that for sure, man. Nate, you got anything else to ask him about sponsorships before we shift gears a little bit? And Miles, you okay on time wise?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think sponsor wise, he hit on pretty much everything that I kind of had questions about, like, throughout his talking. So I'm good there for sure.
Okay. I thought for sure you're going to be like, hey, Pro Guide need a sponsorship on a podcast at all? I thought for sure you're going to wiener that in somewhere.
Right.
But
I was going to ask, like, how long he's been doing that, what kind of questions he's gotten so far.
Yeah, I bet you've got some silly stuff, but let's switch to a little something more serious, if that's okay with you. You kind of touched on it a little bit, and unfortunately, my wife is watching our almost 3-year-old right now. She really wanted to jump in on this podcast. She's also one of the hosts, but she would slap me silly if I didn't ask you a little bit about what's going on in your life the last year. And just so you know, myself and Lola, I'm sure Nate too, we've been like actually like praying for you and your daughter with our kids at night. And I remember when you first came out with the video, it was just so I don't know if you heard the intro we were giving for you about how you just seem like an authentic dude. That definitely sort of bled over into this part of your life. It didn't feel contrived. It didn't feel forced. It felt vulnerable. It felt freaking painful as a dad. I just respect the fire out of you for attacking it and handling it the way you did. So if you would just walk us through a little bit about that and kind of where you're at now with it.
Yeah. And honestly, that I assume that you were talking about like just how we put it on social media, and that was actually the last thing that I had hoped I would ever have to do is actually like, over time it's in the moment, I'm like, I don't want to make, I don't want to put this on blast, because it's my family. I like to keep my family, separated from anything that I'm doing, in the public sphere. But, that obviously hitting that hard and just knowing where we're at, we put it out there, and we just received such tremendous support and generosity from everybody, which just saved us, and then, for those of you that don't know the whole story. So I was down at, uh, Lake Okeechobee practicing. This is a wild, I'm going to dive a little bit deep into this one. So,
Please, yeah.
So
Perfect.
beginning of last season, we went. I drove down from Tennessee to Florida. I actually had my buddy Chris at 44 Tackle down there. He was wrapping a bunch of our boats, so I went down a week early. Well, about Friday, I got a call from my wife saying, and we had already seen some bruises around Riley's eye, or both eyes. They were kind of like these weird phantom bruises, and oddly enough, I had googled it like a month before, and the first picture that came up when I typed in phantom, bruise under kid's eye, baby's eye, was a little girl in England with neuroblastoma. I'm like, that can't be it. Obviously, it can't be cancer. And so we just kind of we had a upcoming doctor visit, and so we're like, all right, well, let's eliminate this ridiculous thought. And so my wife had gone on a Thursday to the doctor to have her checked out. So I was down in Florida, and everything was fine except for, like, the doctor was just like, her liver's out of place. It's like popping down below the rib cage. And so she was just like, that's really weird. And the bruises are really weird too. So let's do some blood work. And then the next day, my wife called me and said that our daughter was sick. She was super sick. I'm going to get emotional here, so I'm going to try not to. She got really sick, and there's a lot of things going on, but I ended up like freaking out. I grabbed the truck. They were actually working on wrapping the truck at the time, and I'm like, I gotta go. And so, like, I took that half wrap truck and just drove all the way back up to Tennessee. And that ended up being, she ended up getting like a UTI, and had like a flu or cold or something. There was some other virus that she got. And so I got back up, and then, we're starting the tournament season. At this point, we don't know anything about cancer or anything like that. So it's like,
Sure.
okay, things are stabilized. My wife had gone to the emergency room with her and done all that stuff. They had canceled a ultrasound, which was a key part of this whole deal, that our physician or our pediatrician had ordered. And so anyways, we're not like thinking cancer. We're just like, okay, all right, it's just a UTI, and she's sick, and she's going to do some follow-up. So I, make sure everybody's good, and go back down. Cause I mean, what am I going to do? Ruin a whole tournament season because, she's sick. Like, that's something that we got to work as a team and do this. So that was my thought at the time. And so I go back down to Florida. The whole time I got this weird gut feeling like something else is wrong, and go out fishing one day with a buddy of mine that I knew from college. And the whole day, like, I'm waiting for stuff, from this. The pediatrician was pissed that the emergency room had canceled the ultrasound, so she ordered another one. And the next day, I got the call down in South Bay, or the like Boy Scout cut on Okeechobee, and that was rough. I'm not gonna talk much about that experience just because it's so hard. And then I drove all the way back, so I made 2 trips back, and I drove down the Florida once, drove back to Tennessee, and then drove back down, and then back up to Tennessee. And then it was just a whirlwind of like trying to figure out how we're going to do this. What are we going to do? Where we're going to go for treatment. And like the place that we were originally at was all out of network as far as insurance. And so, but it didn't matter. Like, we were there the next morning after I got back. We got to the hospital that we were at the beginning. And the lady at the counter is just like, "Are you sure you want to do this? You don't have insurance? You sure? It's really expensive." I'm like, dude, just put her
my daughter
in that CAT scan.
Yeah.
That's what we got to do. I don't care what it is. And so got through all that. And then finally, it was funny because I was talking with a buddy of mine while I'm trying to figure everything out. And he's like, well, what about Matt Pangrack on BTL? Like, what about, like, he works with St. Jude? And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I gotta go.
Yeah,
And so I hung up
that
the
makes
phone,
sense.
called Matt, and then he called, somebody at St. Jude. Now, St. Jude doesn't work that way. It's not like one of those things where it's who you know, but it was a glimpse into the process. So she was able to kind of help me like figure out the process. And if she, like, she can't put in a word or something like that. It just doesn't work.
Gotcha.
And so we ended up finally on that, I think it was a Saturday, we finally got word that we were accepted at St. Jude. And so we went on that. So that is kind of the drawn out, that was a tricky story for me to tell without crying.
Oh, no kidding. Jeez, man.
But
impressive.
that was kind of the ride. And then we lived at St. Jude for 7 months, man. And thankfully, Riley started out with a baseball sized tumor over her right kidney. And through a lot of chemo, she is cancer free.
Man, thank God.
Yeah.
Golly, thank God.
That's
oh
a
my
miracle.
gosh.
That's awesome.
I mean, as a dad,
you got me crying here,
dude. My man, you got me. I guarantee if Lola was out here, she'd be bawling right now. As a parent, like, I have a hard time. Like, a couple weeks ago, Gus was sick, and he's 2, almost 3, and he's throwing up, and that makes me tear up. Like, he's throwing up, like, he's confused as to why he's feeling this way and whatever. Like, how old was Riley when this first started getting going?
10 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she was. So, but dude, babies are extremely, they're extremely durable. They're
resilient.
Rugged.
I mean,
resilient little buggers. Because she barely even, she never threw up once during her chemo.
During chemo too, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She would turn like ashen gray. You could tell like this poison is like doing a number on my daughter.
Yeah.
But she never, and it was, it's hard to get a little baby to sit through, hours of chemotherapy. But yeah, I mean, they're amazing. I will implore everybody that's listening today, if you've got $1, to donate to anything. I don't care what it is. We've actually on my YouTube videos, all of my recent YouTube videos, you can go on my description, and we've got a fundraiser for St. Jude on there. It's actually a fundraiser for the Dick Hiley Bass Classic, which is a sanctioned St. Jude tournament. So all of it goes to St. Jude. But I would offer that would be one of the best ways to donate to such a great organization. So yeah.
And is it like, I mean, is St. Jude what they say it is, like in the commercials, where you don't pay for housing, you don't pay for food,
they like pay
actually
for any of
just
that.
take care of everything?
They'll even fly, they'll even pay for the travel for your friends and family to come over and be your support system.
Wow. That's beautiful.
That's awesome.
It's beautiful, man, because it went from like, okay, we'll be in debt for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And we'll probably have to give up this property that we, worked so hard for, and just built a house, to now we can just focus on our daughter, and so St. Jude and the generosity of everybody, like, again, it just shows you how awesome this industry is and the people in it. Because like when my sister created that GoFundMe for us to pay for our out-of-state costs and everything that's associated with losing employment and all that stuff, people showed up in the craziest way. I'm so humbled by it. But St. Jude, here's the thing, like St. Jude, even if you don't live in the United States, they'll accept you. Like, I got to know people from like India, from Australia. They fly you out. Like, they're not gonna turn you down. Like, you would think that an organization like this, there's got to be some kind of catch. Like, when you show up, you got to sign all this paperwork. They didn't have us sign really any paperwork hardly when we got there. There was no packet of stuff we got to go through and sign our life away in the fine print or something. It was like, you show up and we treat your child, you know.
Wow.
And so very, very special. I didn't even know a place like that existed.
Wow,
Yeah.
man. Golly, I'm so glad to hear she's cancer free. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's incredible, man. I not at all trying to compare things whatsoever, but like our daughter Finley, she's 11. She has scoliosis and she's had 2 spinal surgeries where they fused rods to her spine because her curve was so bad. And there's something about a dad heart when your kid is going through something that you can't actually do anything about. You know, you can try and connect dots and kind of expedite the process, but like I can't, you know, do surgery on my daughter. You're not an oncologist for your daughter. Like that is such a vulnerable, painful feeling. And yet somehow, like in your videos that you put out during the process, like there's strength in that vulnerability. And so I say all that to say, man, I just respect the fire out of you for how you approached it, man. Truly. That's not easy.
Thank you. At that point, you know, we weren't very good. I wasn't very good at keeping up with everything, you know, because everybody wanted to know how's she doing. And it's if I had my choice in the beginning, I would have said, you know, I wouldn't have done anything, you know, out there, you know, in the public eye, you know. But once we did kind of open that up and did that first video and just kind of let everybody know, like, hey, listen, you know, we're kind of in trouble here. You know, everybody was so invested, we had to keep up. And so, you know, I tried to keep up with everything the best I could, but for the most part we did. But we always had people like, what's going on?
Of course.
You know, how's Riley doing? It was, you know, for the most part, if there wasn't anything to report, we just didn't report it. You know, the big things we definitely covered, and I appreciate you saying that. I was always very conscious of like not wanting to make a spectacle of what's going on, but I also in the process, I really started to realize that, hey, listen, this is a great way for you to you know, promote St. Jude, you know, and create some awareness around this in the fishing space. So hopefully I can help with that.
Yeah, dude, that's huge, man. That's wild. It's crazy too. Sometimes like when we're in the middle of something, we can't really see, you know, the potential good that it's going to be long-term, you know, like you said, just bringing awareness to that. Or, you know, like with my daughter, if she didn't have surgery, like she'd be, you know, I don't know if she'd be paralyzed, but she was very, very curvy in her spine. And it's just wild. When you're in the middle of it, sometimes it's hard to see. But then when you press pause, reflect on what you went through, you know, like you said, bringing light to St. Jude in this space, that's pretty humongous.
Yeah. And I also got to give a lot of props to my wife, like a tremendous amount. Like she was so strong and such a good advocate. Like there's a lot of things that I didn't even think to do that she did just from her instincts, you know, throughout the thing. And we're still dealing with it right now. We got some things that we're testing for, you know, that we're trying to figure out. We were just at the doctor yesterday. And so it's like, when you're in that position, it's a little bit hopeless of a feeling, but you realize like as a parent, you got a lot of like responsibilities, you know.
Absolutely.
It's not all about following what the doctors say. As awesome as our, you know, doctors can be, you have to be an advocate for your child. You have to make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted. It's a full-time thing. You got to be very aware.
You know? And you got to try and be strong for them, which is so hard when you're feeling so not strong.
I was not very strong for my daughter. My daughter, you know, our daughter was our rock.
Wow.
Like you would think that we would be the rock for her, and obviously we worked really hard and I'm very proud of like what we did. But Riley was the rock.
Yeah. Gosh, like you said, seeing the resilience that kids have is really something. It's
dude, it's wild.
Yeah.
It's and like you don't want them to have to be like, you don't want your kids to have to be resilient. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, man, no, man. But golly, man, and she got sick so many times. That's the thing about St. Jude is like I was really worried about her like social skills because everybody's afraid to like have their kids around each other, you know, while we're there. And you know, we're staying at the Target house, which is one of the housing units for St. Jude. You got like Target House, you got Domino's Village, and you got
That's cool.
the Ronald McDonald House, which we've stayed in a couple times for visits. But it's like people don't want their kids around each other because they're constantly getting sick and their immune system so reduced. So it's like we started like really worrying about that recently, but we've also got a lot of really good people around us at home that have helped us kind of increase in family too, coming out for like Thanksgiving and stuff. And Riley's like completely changed as far as her, social skills. So she's super outgoing, always smiling. We call her Smiley Riley. So yeah.
And how old is Riley now?
She is 21 months.
Yeah, I was gonna say she's got to be creeping towards 2 years old. Yeah,
getting there. She's getting
that's
there.
wild, dude. It's so funny, right? Like it's such an old school thing to say, like, "Oh, they grow up so fast." And I remember when I was little or younger, I'd be like, "Oh, shut up." And then once you have your own kids, it's like, I mean, the next thing you know, it's so weird, dude. It's so weird. Well, let's shift a little bit, Nate. You got anything else you want to throw in there, man? I don't want to, miss an opportunity for you to chime in.
No, I the biggest thing I wanted to talk about was the St. Jude fundraiser and an opportunity to donate and help out with that. So you hit on that perfect. And any like you said, any amount anybody can give St. Jude's and the Dick Hiley Bass Classic. Those are awesome awesome avenues to give back to. So
yep.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Well, let's end on a positive note. Is that all right?
Yeah.
We'll end on something. I mean, and actually,
that was a positive too.
I was gonna say Smiley Riley's a super positive too, right? Like that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Right now. But let's end on something a little more fishy before we get up out of her. Let me ask you a couple quick questions. Number one, tungsten, Evo, or jackhammer?
Oh, I just did a video about this today.
Did you really?
What are you listening through my Alexa or something?
No.
Don't want to say that name. You don't say the A word around.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
Man, that's a hard one.
It is. They're both so dope.
The jackhammer's proven. What I will say about the tungsten Evo is that there's two qualities to it that make it well suited as a really big player right now. Mm-hmm. Number one, the smaller, more compact head, just from being lead, it's actually legit lead, or not lead, tungsten. I've found that like if you throw a 3/8 ounce jackhammer, it wants to come to the surface. Like it is very hard to get that thing to dig. And a 3/8 ounce tungsten Evo will dig. So you can actually get down to like 4 foot and be slow rolling that thing. So you can actually get a slower retrieve and get deeper with that tungsten Evo, which is really important this time of year. And so I see it as more of a compliment. I think both of them are. I think the jackhammer is probably my primary, just because of how much confidence I have in it.
Sure.
But the tungsten Evo is such a good complement bait right now. Yeah. And the other thing that it does really well is the sound. The sound it's like lipless crankbait category really keyed in on the sound differences, right? And everybody started doing like one knockers and BBs, different things. Same thing goes with the tungsten Evo. Like that sound is very different. The blade to head contact is very distinct. And so if you're fishing through an area with a jackhammer and then you go back through with the tungsten Evo, I'm pretty confident you'll catch some extra fish.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's a statement.
Yeah. It sounds like we need to have both tied on at all times.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't go wrong with either of them. Even the traditional Evo, I call it traditional, it's brand new.
Right. Just non-tungsten,
Yeah, that one's outstanding.
That's a killer, dude. And they have some cool colors in that one. There's some colors in that they don't have in the jackhammer, like the hot snake or like the copper blade. Like there's some really cool looking colors in that little sucker.
You hold them up side by side. The clip is the same. The holes on the blade are the same. They're pretty much very similar to the jackhammer. So I'm not saying that they're the same, and I'm not saying they should replace the jackhammer, but boy, oh boy, it's not like you're fishing something that isn't going to get a lot of bites, compared to the jackhammer. So
yeah, for sure. So I know you're a big chatterbait guy. I
Oh
know
yeah.
you're a chatterbait feller. You're a master at it. What's your rod reel line setup?
So I keep it simple. I use a 7.3 medium heavy Versus series rod from Fitzgerald,
Okay.
and then I usually use anywhere from, if I'm using like a deep one, trying to get really deep, I might use 15, but usually it's like 17 or 20 pound test
Okay.
fluorocarbon. Usually Red Label.
Yeah.
Red Label isn't the, it's one of the least
Yeah.
expensive
It's not very expensive.
in
Yeah,
the
that's
cigar
cool.
lineup, or just in fluorocarbon in general, but it's tough as nails. And if I'm not worrying about like getting it down to a deeper depth, the fact that it has a larger diameter than like Tatsu isn't a big deal. So I go cheap because I'm just going to wear that stuff out. So Red
Yeah.
Label,
I like
20
that.
20 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
sweet,
that's
man. Yeah.
awesome. Heck
Do you
yeah.
ever throw, Miles? I have two that Lola, my wife, bought me. I have two in the Bee Height Delight, which is by far unequivocally my favorite jackhammer color. I throw it in clear water, muddy water, current, still water,
Yeah.
whatever, skipping under docks. One thing I do with vibrating jigs with chatterbaits that a lot of people don't, and maybe I shouldn't let the juice loose, but I use them like a jig sometimes. Like I'll flip them like a jig and just pop them. They work really well for
Yeah.
that too.
Especially this time of year, man.
Yeah, when it's colder water.
It's all about the yo-yo and
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
yeah.
the Rayburn right now, or for the first open,
Yeah.
and that'll be something I'll be doing.
Absolutely. So the question I was
Heck
going to
yeah.
ask is, I only have two of the, what the heck is it? 1.25 ounce, the one
Yeah.
that looks like a football jig almost. The head is so big. Do you ever throw
Yeah.
that thing?
Oh yeah.
Do you really? I've not
yeah.
ever tied them on. I don't know why. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm
Yeah.
scared
I
of it
use
or
the
what.
3/8. I use the 3/4 more. Yeah, but I use it a lot.
Okay, maybe I shouldn't have
I
asked
don't
you
have
that.
a
I
lot
don't
of
want it to be a
I don't have
secret,
a
but
lot of secrets, but
yeah,
there's I don't want to get too much into that, but I use
yeah.
that a lot,
Okay.
and people should use the 3/4 and the 1.25 ounce and just get creative with it. That's what I'll
Mhm.
say.
Yeah, because it feels like
That's
you said
awesome.
about the tungsten. It feels like especially on a straight retrieve, whether you're slow rolling it or if you're kind of cranking it like a spinnerbait and
Yeah.
popping it every once in a while. I remember watching an old, I think was it a Jimmy Houston video, Nate, where he was talking about spinnerbaits and how like you should never reel a spinnerbait straight in. You should always give it a pop here and then. And then he was talking about he's like flaring up that spinnerbait skirt. Got to get that
Skirt.
spinnerbait skirt. But
Yeah.
I try and do that same thing with a jackhammer, kind of make it flare up, whatever.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's hard to keep it at a little bit deeper depth most of the time. And so when you flirt around with those 3/4 ounce and a quarter, now you're talking about a different water column potentially.
Yeah. It's a totally different. I've got two categories of chatterbait fishing. One is a totally unique offshore, heavy chatterbait, 3/4 ounce and the 1.25 ounce, and then the rest is just workhorse up shallow,
Yeah.
skipping around
Right.
stuff, just covering water type of thing. But when that deep bite is on with that
Yeah.
thing, it's wild.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Heck yeah.
I think you do this too, Nate. Like when I fish derbies, I have a game plan. I have like in football, like in the NFL, they usually have their first 15 plays scripted. I always have this script. Like I'm going to go here. I'm going to try this. I'm going to go here. I'm going to try this. And then after 3 hours of no fish, I go along the bank and I just smash them with a jackhammer. Like it always works out. Like just go throw on like like a fire craw or a Bee Height Delight, black, blue, green pumpkin, and just smash them on the bank. I mean, is that not your backup too, Nate? Don't you usually end up putting them in the boat that way?
No, for sure. That's actually, the exact way that I found, one of those honey holes on the river that I talked about earlier
Yeah.
this year was just kind of having no idea what I was doing, and couldn't find any fish in
Yeah.
the typical areas, and just started working a bank and ended up finding a crazy productive area where I sat for 3.5 hours just catching fish after fish after
Yeah.
fish on a jackhammer. So
Yeah. Yeah. You Miles, you ever throw the stealth blade?
I have. I'll be honest. I haven't figured out exactly where I want it. Instead of another one, other than fishing around docks, you can fish in clear water around docks.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good bait because it's a little bit more action than it's not as much action, obviously, in vibration as
No,
like
not at all.
jackhammer.
No, not at
but
all.
it has more action than like a swim jig,
Mhm.
and it's really good. It has a thinner skirt too. It's not as bulky as other
Right.
baits, and so it does work very well around rocks, so or docks rather.
Yeah, and the hook's different too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the hook's a little more finessey, whatever. The only time I've just mopped them up on a stealth blade is I was in, I can't remember the name of the lake. It was like Stone Lake, Little Stone Lake, something like that, way up north up here in Wisconsin. And
Yeah.
my wife, who's a hair, this is a funny story. My wife, who was a hairstylist, was doing hair at a wedding, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be gone all day doing hair, whatever." And I'm like, "Where are you going?" And she told me, I'm like, "Dude, I'll drop you off, and then I'll just go put in. There's a lake like a block down the road. I'm like, I'll go put in and fish this lake. I've never fished, and I poop you not. You could see the bottom in this lake, and probably like like Clear Lake, like 20 feet of water.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
wild, just crystal gin clear, and I could not buy a bite. I mean, I could not. I went into this little pocket, and I threw those little jig in the tubes for crappies, and I loaded up the live well with crappies to make some tacos later. And then I could not buy a bass. And about halfway around the outside of the lake, just like whatever, I'll try. I have like 10 of these stealth blades. I'm like, I'll throw one on, just see what happens. And I just went to a just serial killer, just murdered them, just don't one after the other on like the outside of like shady like laydowns in the super clear water. It was one after the other. I think my biggest was just under 5 pounds, and that was the only time I really went to work with them. But it's the same deal, ultra clear water. I wasn't reeling it super fast. I wasn't popping it because it just has a little shimmy. But yeah, that can be a good lure too, man.
Yeah.
All right, give us one last thing before you go, Miles. Sorry, Nate. Go ahead, Nate.
I got a quick one.
Please.
It's let me get your favorite Z-Man product or bait that's not exactly mainstream. So I don't want to hear chatterbait.
That's easy. That's easy.
Okay.
And I will shorten this up a little bit because I do have to help my wife put Riley to bed because she's still on oral chemo. So, but the palmetto bugs is the most underrated bait in the Z-Man lineup. It is absolute killer, and it looks so dumb. It's the dumbest looking. I hated it when I first started because I'm a big flipper and pitcher, and I love beaver style baits, and that one just did not resonate with me when I first started working with Z-Man. But oh my gosh, it's an absolute murderer, fishing, flipping with it. I've won so much money flipping that, over $100,000 flipping the palmetto bugs.
Wow.
Really weird.
That's saying a lot. Yeah.
I think it has to do with the buoyancy of the Elastec and just how it sits
I
on
was
the bottom.
going to ask that.
But I because it doesn't glide very well. And to me, like a reaction innovation sweet beaver, the glide is kind of where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
But so I was like, when I put it in the water the first time, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to put this on camera.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I have a hard time flipping anything else.
Wow.
The palmetto bugs is the deal, and you just get the palmetto bugs in this color right here. I'll show it to you.
Okay, now we're getting the juice, Nate. Should we beep this out? You think? Should we like beep out what he says?
We should, yeah.
Yeah.
Get it in the.
Can we blur it or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get Bama bug.
Bama bug.
Yeah, with that blue in it.
And you can thank me later.
Okay. All right. That's a good ender then. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was just asking Nate, Miles, do you want me to bleep you out on that? Do you want to put like a censorship beep on there?
What did I say?
No, like when you said palmetto bug, like my favorite Z-Man.
Oh, yeah. No,
I really just throw it in beep.
I'm usually pretty good. I mean, I do, I am kind of a sailor in Alaska.
Yeah. I just meant like to protect your secret juice. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's not the secret. That's not the secret juice. It's not it's not necessarily about the bait. It's where you put it most of the time. But
sure. Yeah.
I will say the palmetto bugs is so good, especially if you got to like slowly move it away from cover or something like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, dude, hey, thank you for taking the time, Miles. The sponsorship talk, the talk about your daughter, your story. I was really looking forward to talking about chatterbaits with you because I look up to the way you fish them.
Maybe next time we'll talk more about chatterbaits instead of everything else.
Yeah, that's fine, man. We would love to have you back on. It was an honor to have you on, man. Yeah, so we'll be thinking about and praying for your daughter still, and wish you the best of luck this year. Thank you so much for jumping on, brother.
No, thank you guys very much. Like I said, I really enjoy it. Like the podcast. I think you guys will go far. Just enjoy it, and I'll be back on.
Yeah, please. All right, we're gonna hold you to it. All right, have a good night, man.
Thank you. See you guys.
All right. Thanks, Miles. Yep. See you, buddy.
Peace.
All right. So obviously that was as awesome as we wanted it to be. Yeah, Nate?
Yeah, and some, I would say.
And then
Like
some.
it was what's the Key and Peele skit? Where he's like a whole nother level.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
that. It
like
was
for
absolutely that.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. I couldn't have asked for anything more. I kind of fall into that, like I get really captivated in a lot of these stories that some of our guests tell, and
Me
this
too.
was kind of another one of those situations where, like, man, just thinking about some of the hardships that he's gone through over the last year, and how positive and reassuring that he's still on the right track to with life and everything. Like, it's amazing. Like, like I said, I was in it for sure.
Yeah. And like you said, positive track and all that, but like with what he's gone through, there's nobody on this earth that would blame him for being like, no, dude, F it.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, when you're a parent and you see a kid suffering, like if your kid's out in the driveway on their bike or something, learn how to skateboard, they fall and skin their knee, whatever, you can go out there and hold them, put a Band-Aid on it, whatever. When your kid's going through some cancer stuff, outside of supporting them and loving them, there's nothing like medicinally that you can do for them. And that's a horrible, helpless, frustrating, confusing, saddening position to be in. And to have the balls, I guess you could say, to have the backbone to like put it on social media, to ask for help. 'Cause that's another thing, right? Like if we're being honest, dude, like we as dudes, we're not always so great at asking for help. I super hate it. It's like that old token, like you're lost driving, but you don't want to stop and ask for directions because somewhere in your head, you're like, oh, I'm gonna figure this out. To ask for help and to be vulnerable is not very fun, and it's not very easy. And yet, oddly, there is strength found in it, especially for another dad who's out there and his daughter's going through something, or his kid's going through something, or like in our stories, there's this power, and I just respect the frick out of him. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. It was gosh, it was great. Like I said, we couldn't ask for anything more. Appreciate Miles and his time and everything. Glad we got this one set up because, man, was it good.
Yeah. And how was the sponsorship talk? Holy moly. I mean, you want like we should really, and maybe I will, we should really clip the talk of like sponsorship and then like send it to Pete Glusek and be like, hey, here's a sponsorship talk for Bass University, because this is like the absolute A to Z. This is what a sponsorship is. This is what to look for. This is how you do it. This is how you don't do it. Here's some misconceptions. I mean, it was just... Yeah, it was just on point. And it was funny too that he was saying that thing about people being like, well, yeah, because you get free Phoenixes. And he was like, no, I don't. Like, he's a very recognizable name and face in the industry. And he's like, no, I do not.
Yeah. And to think of the 4% or 5% is probably a crazy accurate number on the number of professional anglers that are actually getting free boats. You get a free boat because that's why you do what you... God, that's so crazy.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like I was just talking to Kurt today, our homie from Working Class Bowhunter, and like their podcast is called Working Class because he's not a dude who like was born into a multi-million-dollar family and lives on a 3,000 acre plot somewhere and whatever. Like he's worked his butt off to get what he has and to hunt as well as he can and to, buy a small plot that he has of land. And he still gets that crap. Well, if I lived in Illinois and I had all the money and I had a good land to hunt on, I'd be shooting 180 inches too. Like, shut up.
Right.
I mean, I think I've said this on here before. I can't remember, and I could be wrong on the quote. So if somebody wants to fact check me, that's fine. I think it was Benjamin Franklin. It might have been somebody else in that era who said, I never knew a man who's good at making excuses that's good at anything else. And like, if you want to sit back and be like, oh, if I had a free Phoenix, oh, if I had good hunting land, like you're just probably not doing super well at life. Like that's not the kind of talk I would expect, Michael Jordan to have, or I don't know, Brett Favre in his heyday, or Elon Musk, or anybody who's really successful in their space. I don't see them talking that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a really good quote that makes a ton of sense. Like if coming up with excuses is your bit, you're not going to come up with much more. So
you probably ain't going too far in life for sure. But and just to hear him talk about chatterbaits, you know, like that was dope. And I felt the smile on his face, dude, when I started talking about that 1 1/4. That smile on his face, like, frick, don't talk about this.
Right. Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
Keep that heavy one on the low.
Yeah. Hold on. Stick around, Nate. Don't hang up, because we're gonna end this recording right now. And then I want to talk to you for a second, because I'm pretty sure I have an inclination on who his neighbor is that we're not supposed to talk about. So I'm not going to talk about it on here. There was a really funny episode of Parks and Rec back in the day that now in 2025 has not aged well at all. But one of the main characters on that show, Tom Havelford, he's like that really funny dude, Aziz Ansari. He's got like this like upscale sort of like secondhand clothes boutique, because he's so little that he sells his used clothes to like elementary kids. And somebody comes in and wants to buy it, and he keeps on being like, is it Diddy to this lawyer? And the lawyer's like, no, it's not Diddy. But like, it's really funny. But now that I think about it, that didn't age too well. So I don't think that's who his neighbor is. But anyway, you got anything else, Nate?
I don't. No. Just much appreciation to Miles. I mean, that's really it. You know, we had a great talk and got some awesome information out of him. Some stuff I'm going to definitely try to implement. I need to get some of those heavy chatterbaits.
Man. I need to use some. I got them. I just don't throw them. What good does that do? That doesn't help anything. But also, if you look at the bottom of the screen, we have like a little banner that's scrolling across, and it just has Miles' website. It's been on almost the whole episode. Sonar Fishing, SONAR Fishing.com. You can see all the stuff on there. And if you scroll to the very bottom, you can find like his Instagram, Facebook, YouTube links, all the goods. They're all there. So make sure you hit that up. And like Miles said, if you got an extra buck to your name, I think sometimes we as human beings, we sort of like compartmentalize. Like if I can't, if I believe in a cause or something, Tower, or what is it, Tunnel to Towers, that's an incredible cause, or like the Wounded Warrior Project, St. Jude, whatever. It's like, if I can't donate $50, it ain't worth it. But like, you don't realize that if everybody donated $1, it would change everything. So if you got a couple bucks, definitely, consider hopping on St. Jude's and donating. That's a pretty beautiful, heartbreaking, worthy cause for sure. So we'll catch you guys on the next one. Positivity is worth the effort. Bye-bye.
Peace.